Good morning, Silicon Valley out there. And I'm expecting half of Silicon Valley to be at the coffee counter. So this is, of course, a ruse to get you to consume your coffee and come in. Good morning, Jeremy Geelan, Conference Chair of Cloud Expo. Welcome if you're following this on the World Wide Web. I can't imagine why you would be. Save it for the keynote. This is just a way of thanking you for your participation this week in these 4 days, and then just trying to give a tiny little bit of context into some of the things that we've mentioned along the way that I happen to think, just a personal thing really, interesting fact points. So not so much takeaways on the strategy, whatever. Let's leave that to the 192 speakers that you've had access to over these 4 days. Jeremy's role is more this sort of, as you can tell during the week, not quite trivia, but just things that I think perhaps get missed along the way. So I wanted to start on this notion of cloud people by, I don't know how many of you were able to catch the, the rather outrageously named Great Cloud Quiz yesterday, but one of the questions was, and I think you ought to all be able to answer this question, whether it's to your colleagues or indeed to your children. The question was, who was the father? Actually, it wasn't the question. I'll show you what the question was. Here you are. The so-called father of cloud computing died last month, was it? And then there were these 4 choices. By the audience, just tell me, what was the answer? What's the answer to that question? Which of those 4 is the father of cloud computing? That's what I figured. So luckily, everyone on the panel knew that it's D. But they were clouderati. They were people who live and breathe the cloud. And the odd thing is that when you come to a Cloud Expo, everyone's a clouderato, right? Or a clouderata for that matter. So there's no reason that this kind of knowledge is to be possessed by the priests of cloud. So Jeremy's role, apart from anything else, is to make sure that some of these factoids are a little bit better known. So why is it relevant to me that you go away knowing who John McCarthy was, or why it is that actually, because it's very few people, but actually he is the father of cloud computing? So I just want to tell you that. So here he is. He died last year, 84. So, you know, I mean, I'm nearly 84, but most of you aren't. So you probably, you know, weren't that aware of John McCarthy, but some of the older, particularly developers, might be, or will tell us that, you know, they once, I don't know, worked for someone who worked for him, or who knows what. But this is the guy who coined the term artificial intelligence. Right, so something we just take completely for granted. I mean, AI, I mean, we all know exactly what it connotes. You know, that be true of cloud computing or big data? Everybody knows what IA means. It seemed to be exactly the right term at the right time. What was the right time? He coined artificial intelligence in 1956. I wasn't even born in 1956. So, you know, talk about a term that's got legs. Sometimes, you know, when we're discussing cloud computing and big data and SDN, obviously the undertext is it's just all marketees, it'll all go away. Sometimes that's not the case. And I'm going to make a case this morning through this cloud person, John McCarthy, that this one's not going to go away, because like artificial intelligence, although he didn't coin cloud computing, he nailed the concept. So I'm not going to go into NIST definitions, but what I am going to tell you is this. He wrote, by the way, he also, just as an aside, created the Lisp computer language. So, you know, this is a man of parts, John McCarthy. God, you know, rest his soul. He had these AI labs. He was also, you know, an executor. He had AI labs first at MIT, then at Stanford. So, I mean, this pedigree is utterly extraordinary. So when this man writes as he did and spoke as he did in 1961, now I'll admit I was born by then, in 1961, and he says the following: computing may one day be organized as a public utility. Now, the thing about foresight and the thing about being prescient is mostly the people that you are prescient in front of just don't know what you're talking about. That sort of goes without saying. So he already sort of had that notion that compute is an abstraction. Well, that's very ahead of time, right? Computing was all to do with machines. You saw some pictures yesterday, if you were at that particular session, of what Tim Park called his favorite computer. Do you remember? And it had, still had the what do you call them, cylinders and hydraulics. It was a machine, a thinking machine. But here's a man who in 1961, which is really still the thinking machine age, no, compute's an abstraction. Admittedly he called it computing, but even so, just repeat it, computing may one day be organized as a public utility. Now I know that only means he saw public cloud, but I think you've got to give him some considerable points. So, one doesn't like, as a journalist, all those phrases, the father of Java, the father of this, the father of that. What about the mother of? Because there aren't that many, but there are some. And what about the daughter of? And, what does it really prove? But I think it's useful, because the only other candidate for this particular role would be this fellow. And the reason I'm saying, well, I'm sorry, Jeff, nice chap and all, definitely a cloud person, definitely. I mean, amongst other things, you deserve to be among the cloud people. There's just one small thing here. This Business Week cover is from November the 2nd, 2006. So do the math from 1961 to 2006, and he's a little bit behind. But give Jeff Bezos his due. After all, what is that headline? Amazon's risky bet. Odd that the first words in Business Week on cloud computing should be that it's a risky bet. So that will remind us all that as recently as 2006, anybody who was preparing to put a major business behind John McCarthy's, that's how I argue it, behind John McCarthy's contention that, exactly as we've said, computing will one day be organized as a public utility. Oh look, guess what Amazon Web Services was? That's ballsy, because if it went all those years without being done, maybe it was wrong. So I give Jeff totally his due, and that's why he makes the Jeremy Geelan ranking right up there of cloud people, even though we're segueing forward from 61 to 2006, which is quite a leap and shows you how slowly sometimes innovation goes, which is another takeaway from, I hope, from this particular Cloud Expo we've had a much more historical framework from many of the presenters saying what is, the ships that are sailing in now to harbour have been at sea for a long, long time, and they've been crisscrossing the oceans, and there just seems to be this confluence. So if you're nervous that everything isn't just right now and you see the perfect storm or whatever the analogy is and you say, no, they're always saying that. It really is true this time, because some of the ships have been at sea since 1961. You really can bet on this one if you're into betting on it with your business or with your career. You really can bet that the confluence of cloud and big data and what we're going to get onto next, the Internet of Things, this really is the one. Yeah, and I know you've heard that before, but you've never heard it from me. And I'm reasonably old and reasonably cautious and reasonably, in fact, not anti-technology, but reasonably questioning of technology's impact on society. And in this case, I think that it is actually proven that of all the different waves of things that we've invented, the potential for social, economic, political, educational good from cloud computing and its adjuncts is irrefutable. And that's extraordinary if I'm saying that from just 2006. And we're only just beginning to see some of the use cases. I will just press on. There was another question if you missed this this great cloud quiz. This one here, see if you do better at this one. Which company CEO predicted in 2010, CTIA, if you're not familiar with it, is the premier wireless show really in the world, absolutely vast, one of the biggest events in the calendar of technology shows. So which company, CTO, predicted the number of devices connected to the internet will reach 1 trillion, and flagging it as there's this thing that we're going to be calling the Internet of Things, and I, the CTO in question, can tell you that as soon as 2013, and he or she was talking in 2010, so it's not one of those Gartner type predictions one might have thought, just really, I'm right at the center of this, you'll see when I tell you which one it was, and that's my prediction. And my only point here, any guesses which that was? Which of the four? A. Well, you're absolutely right. So this is not sort of naming and shaming or anything, but there's a slight problem with Padma's prediction. Her 3-year out prediction of the 1 trillion connected devices. Anyone know what the problem is? She was wrong. She was wrong not by 1 order of magnitude, not by 2 orders of magnitude, but by several orders of magnitude. And there are all sorts of reasons, perhaps, why even the CTO of Cisco, who've sat at the center of all of this for all the years that we've had the internet nearly, how could that happen? And this is another takeaway. So again, this is not naming and shaming. You'll think from the next slide perhaps it is, but you can enter JG21's cloud people list for all sorts of reasons, and I promise you this is not derogatory or any way or meant to disparage this marvelous woman. There is 1 trillion written out. It's very easy when we get to these kinds of numbers to be wrong by an order of magnitude. It's just a zero. But look at the impact of zeros when you're getting into the bigger numbers, and probably if one was to explain what went wrong with that, because remember, I'm a great proponent of IoT. I'm the one who asked Tim Park from Microsoft to come yesterday and give us the Microsoft take on the Internet of Things, because I'm sure you're all aware, Microsoft does seem to be having some sort of renaissance, and that's also in terms of thought leadership, not just in terms of execution and in terms of products and in terms of services and in terms of reinvention. But what attracts me as a conference chair is when there's thoughtfulness going behind, as there is with Cisco, so give them their due. And what Padma Warrior, I think, just simply got wrong was at the time the economy was very strong. Everything did seem to be lined up, just like I'm saying it is now lined up. So probably she was completely right, but just not about, well, she is completely right, obviously, but not about the particular date. And one of the things, I don't know how mathematical you are, and actually I'm not up to date on the current global population, except by a large rounding error. But if, for example, you know what the global birth rate is, and if you believe, as I do, that we're not that many years away from every new child on Earth being given an IP address at birth by every single nation on Earth, then whatever we're interacting with times that number of births in, let's say, 2020 times the number of global births in 2021, 2022, we shall reach the trillion, before, in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye. And why is it relevant to the Cloud Expo conference or to all the other 191 speakers that have spoken here alongside me? It's relevant because cloud undergirds a lot of that. The premises of cloud computing are that, my God, when you've got that much traffic going around, the whole network will need re-architecting, because what are we going to do? We never know when and where we need this compute power. So, what are the classic examples of Internet of Things? Let's look at the connected car. So the connected car, which all millennials now insist on, they don't ask how many miles it does to the gallon. They say, has it got an IP address? Does it boot up at the same time I turn the key? Am I online from that moment? And the answer from, say, Ford Motor Car, who have a project called EVOS, is absolutely. I mean, it goes without question. You're now driving a computer on wheels. The idea of a car being something to which we put technology on top as an additional extra, as an optional extra, that's gone. we understand that you simply want to be connected, and of course that goes for when you're on the move. And here is your connection device. It's got 4 wheels and a gear stick perhaps, and it might be automatic or manual, but basically it's to keep you online. So I'm thinking that the Internet of Things just looked at from a traffic point of view. Well, that's great. So everyone's got that connectivity. When do they most need it? Well, that's just email and things. I'm not thinking about that at all. The real use there is machine to machine. So it's the car speaking to the network, saying where it is, and the network saying, great, thanks for that, because there's a whole ton of trouble right ahead of you, so we'll get back to you on where there isn't a ton of trouble. And this is all happening, you know, at 8:45 on 101. So the huge spikes that cloud computing was built for, you know, that we have evangelized around for the last however many years. So all the use cases that I can think of to do with IoT have spikeability as one of their notions. You know, the other one is always the fridge. You know, the fridge is going to tell us when it needs filling. When's it going to tell us? Probably on a Friday evening, because people go Saturday morning shopping. So, you know, when that program is done, when would people want to know whether they need coleslaw? They don't want to know on a Wednesday during a meeting at the office. They want to know at a systemized time, so it'll be, you know, user decides. But so the journeys that can be made up to the network and back down again are all going to come at the same time. Absolutely, you can be certain of it. And the only thing that will differ is that first you've got to deal with Australia's demand for the Internet of Things. Now it exists and has been enabled, with Asia's demand, which will be absolutely ginormous for the Internet of Things now that it's been enabled, and then Europe, North America, you know, follow the sun, you can work it out. And again, when you listen, for example, to Verizon saying how you're literally going to be able, if you're an enterprise, to move where your compute is coming from to reduce latency, you begin to think, my God. So they weren't just building stuff and saying, let's hope they come. They are reacting to this world that if you want to say, yeah, you know, Verizon, we will enable the Internet of Things, you've got to be able to deliver. And I use that example in particular because I was talking to Jim Anthony last night, who you saw speak here, or I hope you saw, because that is the shape of things to come. Okay, just one company. But Verizon, by the next Cloud Expo, will be able to say, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. I mean, I'm sorry if the share price goes up and this is considered to be hype, but the fact is that what they're trying to do is be absolutely certain by, you know, however long that takes. I'm guessing the middle of next year. That's not from Jim. Obviously, he wouldn't say anything like that in public, but they want to be absolutely certain that they can deliver exactly the compute power that you need in exactly the geographical zone you need, but still adhering to the SLA they have with you. Because otherwise it's meaningless. So there's no good like moving on one of those dashboards. So, oh good, no latency now, lots going on in Australia with their Australian divisions, all taken care of. No good if that's not true. So they absolutely won't go public on that until it is true, which obviously all major companies will need to do. So there's a certain amount of caution and prudence when you get into the Internet of Things space, particularly, that I think we'll see much more caution even in the cloud space, where I think most people, if I lined up CEOs as I often do, you know, most people would probably concede there has been a little bit of, you know, announcement has got a little bit ahead of reality. That's not going to happen when we're talking about, okay, it might not be Padma's trillion, but when we're talking, you know, millions of billions, you really got to know whereof you speak. So those, you know, rather randomly you might think, but not when you think what I've told you about them. John McCarthy, Jeff Bezos, and Padma Warrior, who I'm absolutely love to death, and I think Cisco's contribution to what they like to call the Internet of Everything will be completely major and significant and interesting and spectacular. They are this morning's 3 cloud people. So I'm going to cede the stage. Microsoft needs 5 minutes to set up. Thank you very, very much. If ever you need to get hold of me, that's terribly easy, both those ways. Hope you enjoy the day. I'll be back up to introduce our keynote speaker shortly. Thank you.